really great to be here with everyone. I was reminded I was in the speaker's backyard in Louisiana over the weekend and on Friday, and we went to a restaurant there, and our waiter by the name of Joe was wonderful. He was a multi-generational Louisiana and New Orleans, and he was our server, and he was just so impressive. And towards the end, he brought up that, well, this is a job he had to take because he was furloughed and so was not making any money, and he worked for the federal government. He didn't know who I was. And I said, well, Joe, I can appreciate that. You know, I'm sort of in that world as well. And I said, where do you work? And he said, well, I work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in their New Orleans office as part of the financial team. And so it just really brought home for me, to echo what Mike said, just thanking so many thousands of federal workers who are showing up, who are still doing their job, who aren't getting paid, those that are now concerned about putting food on the table and making their mortgages and paying their rent, but to be out in the country, I was in Indiana yesterday, and understand the real sort of pain that's being felt. But just to echo a couple of the themes that Speaker Johnson talked about, again, the idea that the Democrats have now for 14 different votes voted to keep the government closed is absolutely unconscionable. Every day they hold the federal government hostage. They are leaving millions of families' livelihoods and critical benefits, including SNAP, hanging in the balance. Of course, we all know the 13,000 air traffic controllers working without pay, many turning to Uber, taking second jobs in restaurants, et cetera, as this shutdown continues. Hundreds of thousands of federal employees are not receiving a paycheck. Thousands of small business loans are going unapproved each month because of the shutdown, equating to almost $4 billion in capital being taken out of the pockets of small business owners across this country, truly the backbone of our economy. It is a fact that Democrats shut down the government over free health care for illegal aliens and their $1.5 trillion partisan wish list. Democrats need to stop playing politics with the livelihoods of hardworking Americans and open the government now by voting for the clean resolution. We are here today because SNAP benefits run dry tomorrow. So the truth has finally revealed itself, hasn't it? Democrat support for programs like SNAP is now reduced to cynical control over people's lives. This last month has shown that the party who constantly says it puts people over politics does the complete opposite. Millions of Americans, as of tomorrow, will no longer receive SNAP and potentially WIC or even a paycheck. Democrats have instigated a disgusting dereliction of duty unlike anything I have seen in all my years doing this work, all to favor illegal aliens and other radical far-left policies that benefit only a small, tiny sliver of their base. I am embarrassed for Chuck Schumer. He is going out of his way to please the likes of Zohran Mamdani, a man who is polarizing America with his socialist rhetoric and anti-American principles. The very essence of government responsibility is to the citizens who live and work here to protect their interests first, unless you are a Democrat in the United States Senate. Chuck Schumer and the Democrats are doing all this because they fear the socialists and the radicals to their left. Ironically, in leaving American families hungry and American children without food, they are giving a preview of what those socialists will do to every one of us if they ever take power. What you're really seeing here is the end of the Democrats as a responsible party of government, a party that ends governance, a party that ignores Americans, a party that cannot master the most basic principles and processes of government, is a party that cannot be trusted with the reins of power. It isn't oriented toward anything but the end of the system in which it exists. SNAP is arguably just the beginning. The logical and inevitable end to where this all goes is the Democrats and the whole superstructure of constitutional government. President Trump has made it clear, reopen the government, get government funding back on solid footing, restore the confidence of American families who count on programs like SNAP, and stop treating them and their well-being as pawns in a political game, according to the Democrats. Prioritize American citizens, prioritize American families, and prioritize American children. I would like to make a quick note and then want to obviously leave lots of time for questions. Yesterday, I was in Indiana, and I was visiting a soybean farm, a sixth-generation soybean farm, the Everetts, and they have about 1,500 acres right outside of Indianapolis. We were harvesting corn, but they also do soybeans. And as I was there, it occurred to me that what President Trump has been doing over the last week or weeks in fighting across the world to open up markets for American farmers, for American families, while the Democrats are back here playing political games. It must stop. We must get the government open. And our citizens and these voters and our taxpayers and our families and our children expect no less. Thank you all.
All right, take a few questions. Chad, go ahead. You're standing up in the back. Go ahead.
Hello, Chad. Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to explain that. So the fact that the Democrats are saying, but wait, USDA has money in their accounts, why it is really their fault, I've seen it over and over and over from some of their leaders, is absolute false, and it is a lie. We have been saying on October 10th, we sent messages out. On October 24th, we sent messages out. These benefits end on November 1st. Now, let me get down into a little bit of the details on that to better explain. So there is a contingency fund at USDA, but that contingency fund, by the way, doesn't even cover, I think, half of the $9.2 billion that would be required for November SNAP, but it is only allowed to flow if the underlying program is funded. It's called a contingency fund, and by law, contingency fund can only flow when the underlying fund is flowing. So for example, if today the Democrats say, oh, never mind, sorry, we'll open the government, and SNAP flows, Hurricane Melissa or one of the hurricanes hits, that's the contingency fund that we would use to send more money into the vulnerable communities that are harmed by a specific event like a hurricane. But it is a contingency fund that can only flow if the underlying appropriation is approved. And listen, even if it could flow, it doesn't even cover half of the month of November. So here we are again in 2 weeks having the exact same conversation. Spoken to the president either since last night, but let me say this. He is, and I've been next to him for almost 9 or 10 years now. He is so resolutely focused on delivering for the American people all day, every day, 7 days a week, 20 hours a day. This is what he is thinking about. And as the world's greatest deal maker, from his perspective, the way he thinks out of the box as a businessman is how do we end this nonsense, and how do we again open the government, and how do we support these families that need support?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd already called on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Madam Secretary, question to you. So I know you addressed the contingency fund, but SNAP has never run out of funding in its 60-year history. That's right. During shutdown. Why were past administrations able to find funding to keep it afloat in a shutdown that you can't?
Well, let me see. I've got a chart I want to show you all on the SNAP funding. My charts are slightly wanky because our print shop is closed because we're furloughed. So it was a little arts and crafts time over at USDA early this morning. So this is the chart of the SNAP program. Now, I know everyone can't see this, but this goes back to October of 2023. And I want everyone to follow. This is the red line that under Joe Biden, you see an almost 30% increase in the cost of the SNAP program over the 4 years that President Biden and the USDA was overseeing it with Congress funding it. And you see now the downward trend since President Trump was reelected November, and we've had about 650,000 people move off of SNAP since President Trump was elected. A press conference for another time. That's obviously the goal of all these programs, is to move families into real work and the dignity of that. I say that because the astronomical costs of the SNAP program under Joe Biden was historical. It was unprecedented, and we don't have the same levels of funding that were there in the past. And by the way, for 1 month, we have Band-Aided and bubble-gummed and duct taped this deal to get this 1 month of funding in for SNAP, the $9 billion. Thank you.
Secretary, quick follow-up. I mean, because reality is setting in for a lot of people this weekend. So what do you say to the millions of people who stand to lose their food stamp benefits? What should they do?
My message to America is, first, the fact that your government is failing you right now. That poverty is not red or blue. It is not a Republican or Democrat issue. It doesn't matter who you voted for or even if you voted. That if you are in a position where you can't feed your family and you're relying on that $187 a month for an average family in the SNAP program, that we have failed you. But I think what's so important, and this is why we keep hammering this, the Republicans have voted over and over and over again to open this government so that these funds don't stop. And for 14 different times, the Democrats have said, no, we are going to hold hostage the most vulnerable families in this country so that we can get our left-wing radical agenda into the government and the governing structure. And to that, President Trump, Speaker Johnson, Majority Leader Thune have said absolutely not, and we're very grateful for that. Please vote yes. We implore the Democrats in the Senate to vote yes to get this government open and these people the benefits that they need to feed their families. Now, so a couple of quick things on the, I guess the silver lining in all of this is that we're having a national conversation on our SNAP program, that this has sort of shined a light on a program that, especially under the last administration, has just become so bloated, so broken, so dysfunctional, so corrupt that it is astonishing when you dig in. So 3 important things on that. The first, I talked about the extraordinary explosion of benefits under the last administration. And what happened was that the money that was going out was zero accountability. So one of the very first things we did when I was sworn in was send a letter to all the states and to remind everyone the SNAP program is administered through the states and the governor's office. So send a letter to all the states saying no more illegal aliens on SNAP. Period, full stop. So that's already a rule of this administration. We're working to enforce it every single day. The second thing is we began a very serious investigation into a lot of the fraud and abuse that we kept getting anecdotal stories of that no one was doing anything about. And so just in the last, I think, 6 months, we've had major dozens of arrests, people going to jail, fraudulent activity of 50 million here. One guy's registered for SNAP in 6 different states. I mean, it's one thing after another. So we are taking that extremely, extremely seriously. And we'll continue to do so. And then the third thing on this is that for the first time ever, we, the USDA, have asked the states for their data so that we can ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately. Not surprisingly, all of the red states said, yes, please help us with this. We want to do the right thing. We want to make sure there's not all this corruption and fraud. By the way, 2 blue state-led governors also leaned in, Colorado and North Carolina, alongside every one of the red governors. But the other blue states, California, Oregon, New York, Washington, all of them actually sued us and said, oh no, we're not going to give you any data. So the problem is you have an extremely corrupt program, but up until this administration and with President Trump's direct focus on this and making sure every taxpayer dollar is spent appropriately, we've never really had the opportunity to dig in. So we're going to be talking a lot more about SNAP reform. We've got a lot of people listening now, which is very, very helpful, and to take that program back to its original intent of helping those who are truly needy in our communities, but not to have a massive welfare benefit where so many people are taking advantage of it that shouldn't be.